The radio crackled to life at 3:47 hours, breaking the pre-dawn silence that had settled over forward operating Base Crimson like a burial shroud. Staff Sergeant Marcus, Bulldog, Rodriguez pressed his headset closer to his ear, straining to catch the fragmented transmission cutting through layers of static and distance. What he heard made his blood run cold. Crimson Base, this is Reaper 7. We are compromised, bridge heavily fortified, casualties mounting. The voice belonged to Lieutenant Commander Jake Iceman Harrison, leader of SEAL Team 5, a man who had never once used the word compromised in 12 years of special operations. The transmission dissolved into white noise, then silence. In the operations tent, Colonel Patricia, Iron Lady, Voss stood rigid before the tactical display, her weathered fingers tracing the red markers that indicated Reaper 7's last known position. The Coast River crossing had been deemed impassable for 3 weeks, ever since Taliban forces had transformed the ancient stone bridge into a fortress bristling with RPGs, heavy machine guns, and enough IEDs to crater half of Afghanistan. But the SEALs had insisted they could infiltrate under cover of darkness, neutralize the guards, and secure the crossing for the advancing Marine Battalion. Now they were pinned down, bleeding and running out of ammunition on the wrong side of a killing field that stretched 500 meters of open ground. The bridge guards had night vision, elevated positions, and time on their side. Every minute that passed meant more American blood soaking into Afghan soil. "Ma'am, we've got birds on standby," offered Captain Miguel Santos, the air operations officer, his voice carefully neutral. "F-16s can be on station in 20 minutes. Standard close air support package." Colonel Voss shook her head slowly, never taking her eyes off the display. "Too much collateral damage. That bridge is the only crossing for 40 clicks in either direction. We destroy it, we strand ourselves on this side of the river for months." She paused, studying the terrain overlay. "What about precision strikes? Something surgical?" Santos shuffled through his roster sheets, knowing the answer before he spoke. "Ma'am, our Apache pilots are grounded with mechanical issues. The Kiowas don't have the firepower to penetrate those hardened positions. And the F-16s, well, you know how that ends." The colonel's jaw tightened. She knew exactly how it would end. A 500-pound bomb reducing the bridge to rubble, the SEALs trapped on the far side with no extraction route, and a Marine battalion forced to find another way across a river that had already claimed too many lives. Then a voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. "Ma'am, request permission to take the mission." Every head in the tent turned toward the figure standing in the entrance. First Lieutenant Evelyn Viper Blackthorne emerged from the shadows, her flight suit bearing the distinctive patches of the 354th Fighter Squadron. At 5'4" with auburn hair pulled back in regulation style, she looked more like a college student than a combat pilot. But Colonel Voss knew better than to judge by appearances. The silence that followed carried the weight of unspoken doubts. Viper flew an A-10 Thunderbolt II, an aircraft that most pilots either worshipped or ridiculed. The Warthog, as it was affectionately known, wasn't fast or pretty. Built around a 30mm Gatling gun that could shred a tank, it flew low and slow, designed for one purpose: killing things on the ground with surgical precision. In the right hands, it was the most feared aircraft in the American arsenal. In the wrong hands, it was a flying coffin. "Blackthorne," Colonel Voss said slowly, "the bridge guards have shoulder-fired SAMs. You'd be flying directly into a missile envelope at low altitude. It's a death trap." Viper stepped forward, her boots clicking against the plywood floor. "Ma'am, with respect, that's exactly what the A-10 was built for. I can put 30mm rounds through a dinner plate at 500 meters. Those bridge guards won't know what hit them." Captain Santos cleared his throat. "Lieutenant, you've been in country for exactly 3 weeks. This isn't Nevada test range. These guys shoot back." The comment hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Viper's green eyes flashed, but her voice remained steady. "Captain, I've logged more combat hours in simulation than most pilots get in real combat, and I've studied every inch of that bridge approach. I know where they're hiding." Colonel Voss studied the young pilot's face, searching for signs of false bravado or dangerous overconfidence. What she found instead was something far more unsettling: absolute certainty. This wasn't a rookie pilot seeking glory. This was someone who had already calculated the odds and accepted the consequences. "The SEALs are running out of time," Viper continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Every minute we spend debating this, good men are dying. My bird is fueled and armed. I can be airborne in 5 minutes." The radio crackled again, weaker this time. "Crimson Base, Reaper 7, ammunition critical. Request immediate support, taking heavy casualties." The transmission cut to static, then silence. In that moment of dead air, every person in the tent understood that they were listening to dying men. The weight of command settled on Colonel Voss's shoulders like a mountain. She had two choices: gamble everything on an untested pilot flying an unglamorous aircraft into a missile-filled death trap, or watch an elite SEAL team get slaughtered because she was too cautious to roll the dice. "Blackthorn," she said finally, her voice carrying the authority of absolute command, "you have 5 minutes to brief your mission. If I like what I hear, you're cleared for takeoff. If I don't—" She left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. Viper snapped to attention. "Yes, ma'am, 5 minutes." As the young pilot turned toward the briefing area, Colonel Voss caught her arm. "Evelyn," she said quietly, using the pilot's first name for the first time. "Bring my boys home." Viper met her gaze without flinching. "Every single one of them, ma'am." The pre-dawn darkness seemed to press against the tent walls, as if trying to smother the desperate planning taking place inside. Outside, the distant rumble of helicopters and convoy vehicles created a constant backdrop of war. But inside the operations tent, all attention focused on the tactical display, where First Lieutenant Evelyn Blackthorn traced her attack route with steady fingers. "The bridge guards have established 3 primary firing positions," she began, her voice clear and professional despite the weight of scrutiny from every officer in the room. "Alpha position is the North Tower, approximately 40 feet above the river. They've got a PKM machine gun and at least 2 RPG teams. Bravo position is the South Approach, sandbag positions with interlocking fields of fire. Charlie position is mobile, roving patrols with shoulder-fired SAMs." Colonel Voss leaned forward, studying the satellite imagery. "How do you know all this?" "I've been monitoring radio intercepts and studying drone footage since I arrived in-country, ma'am. Call it professional curiosity." Viper's fingers moved across the map with the confidence of someone who had memorized every detail. "The bridge guards rotate shifts every 4 hours. At 400, they'll have minimum manning, maybe 8 to 10 fighters total. But they'll be alert because they know something's happening." Captain Santos shook his head. "Lieutenant, those positions are hardened, concrete and steel. Your 30-millimeter rounds might not penetrate." "They don't have to penetrate everything, Captain. Just the right things." Viper turned to face him directly. "The PKM position in the North Tower has a firing port facing west toward the SEAL position. One burst through that port eliminates their primary suppression capability. The RPG teams are using standard defensive positions. They expect ground attack, not air attack from the River Valley approach." "The River Valley approach," Colonel Voss's eyebrows rose. "That puts you below the bridge level. You'll be flying through a canyon with mountains on both sides. One mistake and you're flying into solid rock." Viper nodded grimly. "Yes, ma'am, but it also puts me below their radar coverage and outside their expected threat axis. They're watching for aircraft coming from the west or south. Nobody expects an A-10 to come screaming up the river valley at 50 feet. The tactical audacity of the plan was breathtaking in its simplicity. The coast river carved a deep channel through the mountains, with steep walls that would mask the approach of any aircraft brave enough or crazy enough to fly through it. But the margins for error were virtually non-existent. At the speeds necessary to maintain element of surprise, Viper would have perhaps 3 seconds to acquire, engage, and destroy each target before banking hard to avoid the bridge structure itself. "What about the mobile SAM teams?" asked Major Williams, the intelligence officer. SA-7s and SA-14s have a maximum effective range of 3 kilometers. They could engage you before you reach the target area. "Not if they don't see me coming." Viper's smile was grim but confident. "The A-10's thermal signature is lower than most people think, especially when flying low through a river valley. By the time they acquire me, I'll already be on the attack run." Colonel Voss studied the satellite imagery with the practiced eye of someone who had spent 25 years making life-and-death decisions based on incomplete information. The plan was elegant in its directness, but terrifying in its execution requirements. Everything depended on split-second timing, perfect navigation, and the kind of flying that separated legends from obituaries. "What's your extraction route?" she asked. "Same as the ingress, ma'am. Back down the river valley, then north to the extraction point. Total time over target, 90 seconds. The bridge guards won't know what hit them until it's too late to matter." The silence that followed was broken only by the distant thump of helicopter rotors and the ever-present hum of generators. Every officer in the tent was performing the same mental calculation, weighing the probability of success against the certainty of disaster if the mission failed. Lieutenant Commander Harrison's voice crackled over the radio again, weaker than before. "Crimson Base, Reaper 7. We have wounded. Ammunition down to emergency reserves. Request immediate assistance." Colonel Voss closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of command pressing down like a physical force. When she opened them, her decision was final. "Lieutenant Blackthorne, you are cleared for immediate launch. Call sign Viper 11. Your mission is close air support for Reaper 7, with specific instructions to neutralize bridge guards while preserving the bridge structure itself." She paused, meeting Viper's gaze directly. "Rules of engagement are weapons free on confirmed hostile targets. You have full authority to prosecute any threat to friendly forces." Viper snapped to attention. "Understood, ma'am. Weapons free, preserve bridge structure, bring the SEALs home." "One more thing," Colonel Voss added as Viper turned toward the exit. "If this goes bad, if you get into trouble up there, you abort immediately. We won't sacrifice one pilot to save even an entire SEAL team. Is that clear?" For the first time since entering the tent, Viper hesitated. Then she shook her head slowly. "With respect, ma'am, I didn't volunteer for this mission to abandon it at the first sign of trouble. Those men are counting on me." Colonel Voss felt a chill run down her spine. She had seen that look before, in the eyes of pilots who were about to do something either incredibly heroic or incredibly stupid. Sometimes the difference was measured in inches and split seconds. "Then God go with you, Lieutenant. Bring everybody home." Viper saluted crisply. "Roger that, ma'am. See you at the debrief." As the young pilot disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness, Colonel Voss turned back to the tactical display, where red markers still showed the SEAL team's desperate position. In 15 minutes, they would know whether they had just witnessed the birth of a legend or the beginning of a tragedy. The A-10 Thunderbolt II sat on the tarmac like a predator awakening from sleep, its twin engines spooling up with a distinctive whine that separated it from every other aircraft in the American inventory. First Lieutenant Evelyn Blackthorne completed her walk-around inspection with methodical precision, her gloved hands checking weapons pylons, control surfaces, and the massive GAU-8 cannon that formed the aircraft's backbone. "Ugly as sin but twice as mean," muttered Senior Airman Rodriguez, the crew chief responsible for Viper's aircraft. Despite his gruff exterior, Rodriguez had developed genuine affection for both the pilot and her plane over the past 3 weeks. The A-10 wasn't glamorous like the F-16 or sophisticated like the F-22, but it was honest in its purpose, killing enemy forces while keeping its pilot alive. Viper ran her fingers along the cannon barrel, feeling the cold metal beneath her palm. 30 millimeters of depleted uranium justice, capable of firing 4,000 rounds per minute with accuracy measured in feet rather than yards. In the hands of a skilled pilot, the GAU-8 could write death sentences with surgical precision. "She's ready for you, Lieutenant," Rodriguez called out as he completed his final checks. "Full ammunition load, maximum fuel, and I personally inspected every bolt and rivet. This bird will bring you home." "I know she will, Rodriguez. Thanks for taking care of us." Viper's voice carried genuine warmth despite the pre-flight tension. She had learned early in her career that crew chiefs were the unsung heroes of military aviation, the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. As she climbed into the cockpit, Viper felt the familiar embrace of switches, displays, and controls that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. The A-10's cockpit was Spartan compared to newer aircraft, but every instrument had a purpose, every switch served a function. There was no wasted space, no unnecessary complexity. Like the aircraft itself, the cockpit was designed for one thing: combat effectiveness. "Crimson Tower, Viper 1-1 requesting clearance for immediate takeoff," she radioed as the engines reached full power. "Viper 1-1, Crimson Tower. You are cleared for takeoff runway 27, winds 280 at 12 knots. Contact departure control on frequency 254.4. Good hunting." "Roger, cleared for takeoff. Viper 1-1 rolling." The accelerated down the runway with deceptive power, its twin turbofan engines pushing 15,000 pounds of aircraft and ordnance into the pre-dawn sky. Unlike the rocket-like acceleration of fighter jets, the Warthog climbed steadily, purposefully, like a predator that knew exactly where it was going and what it intended to do when it arrived. At 5,000 feet, Viper banked east toward the Coast River Valley, the lights of the forward operating base falling away beneath her like dying embers. The darkness outside her cockpit was absolute, broken only by the faint glow of her instruments and the occasional flicker of distant lightning. Afghanistan's mountains rose around her like sleeping giants, their peaks lost in cloud cover that promised weather complications she couldn't afford. Departure control, Viper 1-1 level at 5,000, proceeding to target area. Viper 1-1, departure control. Contact Overwatch on frequency 306.8 for tactical coordination. Weather is marginal with scattered thunderstorms. Be advised, enemy activity is heavy in your target area. Copy, contacting Overwatch, Viper 1-1 out. She switched frequencies, feeling the familiar flutter of pre-combat nerves that every pilot experienced regardless of training or experience. The difference between veterans and rookies wasn't the absence of fear. It was the ability to channel that fear into hyper-alert focus. Overwatch, Viper 1-1 checking in for close air support mission. The voice that responded belonged to an Air Force controller embedded with the SEAL team. Viper 1-1, Overwatch. Glad you're here. Reaper 7 is pinned down on the north side of the bridge, approximately 200 meters from the structure. Enemy positions are as briefed. Friendlies are marked with infrared strobes, visible on your targeting pod. Copy, Overwatch. Confirm friendly positions marked with IR strobes. Request immediate status on Reaper 7. A different voice came over the radio, Lieutenant Commander Harrison himself, speaking in the clipped tones of someone operating under extreme stress. Viper 1-1, Reaper 7 actual. We have 3 wounded, ammunition down to 30%, and enemy forces massing for final assault. We need immediate fire support on bridge positions or we're not making it to sunrise. The raw desperation in his voice cut through Viper's professional calm like a knife. These weren't training scenarios or simulation exercises. Real men were bleeding and dying, while she flew through the darkness toward a target that bristled with weapons designed specifically to kill aircraft like hers. Reaper 7, Viper 11. I'm inbound to your position with full ordnance load. Mark your furthest advance position and stay low. I'll take care of the bridge guards. Copy, Viper 11. Marking now with green smoke. You're cleared hot on all positions north and east of the bridge structure. Through her night vision system, Viper could see the Coast River Valley opening before her like a dark wound in the earth. The mountains on either side rose nearly vertical from the water's edge, creating a natural corridor that would either conceal her approach or become her tomb if anything went wrong. She pushed the throttles forward and descended toward the river, feeling the A-10 respond with eager acceleration. At 200 feet above the water, traveling at 300 knots, she was committed to an approach that left no room for second thoughts or course corrections. The canyon walls flashed past her wingtips with terrifying proximity, but her training held firm. Every simulation, every training flight, every hour in the cockpit had prepared her for exactly this moment. Viper 11, Overwatch. Be advised, enemy SAM teams reported active in your target area. Recommend high-altitude approach to minimize exposure. Viper's response was calm despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Negative, Overwatch. High altitude puts me in the middle of their engagement envelope. I'm staying in the weeds. What she didn't say was that high altitude also meant less accuracy, and the mission required surgical precision to preserve the bridge while eliminating its defenders. The SEALs needed that bridge intact, and Viper intended to give them exactly what they needed. The first muzzle flashes appeared ahead and above her position, the bridge guards firing at targets they couldn't see clearly in the darkness. The infrared signature of their weapons blazed like beacons through her targeting system, providing perfect aim points for the destruction she was about to unleash. Target acquired, she whispered into her radio, beginning attack run. The bridge materialized out of the darkness ahead of her like something from a fever dream, its ancient stone arches spanning the river with medieval grandeur, while modern weapons sprouted from every defensive position. Muzzle flashes winked from the towers and approaches like malevolent stars, each one representing a threat to both the trapped SEALs and her own survival. Viper's targeting computer automatically calculated range, deflection, and lead angles as she lined up on the north tower where the PKM machine gun had been laying down suppressive fire for the past 2 hours. Through her heads-up display, she could see the precise point where her 30mm rounds would impact, turning concrete and steel into deadly fragments. Guns, 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 she called over the radio, squeezing the trigger. The GAU-8 cannon erupted with a sound like the world's largest chainsaw, sending a stream of depleted uranium rounds downrange at 65 rounds per second. The effect on the North Tower was immediate and catastrophic. The machine gun position simply ceased to exist, replaced by a cloud of pulverized masonry and twisted metal. But there was no time to admire her marksmanship. Already the A-10 was thundering toward the bridge structure itself, requiring an immediate bank to avoid flying directly into the stone arches. Viper pulled hard left, feeling gravitational forces press her deep into the ejection seat as she maneuvered between the canyon walls. Target destroyed, she reported, fighting to keep her voice steady as she pulled out of the turn. Engaging secondary positions. The RPG teams on the south approach had heard her coming and were frantically trying to acquire her aircraft with their shoulder-fired missiles. Through her night vision system, she could see figures running between sandbagged positions, their thermal signatures bright against the cool stone. But they were looking for her in the wrong direction, expecting her to attack from the west rather than following the river valley. She lined up for a second pass, this time targeting the clustered positions where the RPG teams had taken cover. The accuracy required was daunting. She needed to eliminate the enemy soldiers while avoiding damage to the bridge structure itself. The margin for error was measured in feet rather than yards. Viper 1-1, Reaper 7, crackled Lieutenant Commander Harrison's voice. You got the machine gun. Suppressive fire has stopped. We're beginning movement toward the bridge. Copy, Reaper 7. Stay low until I finish with the RPG positions. I'm making a second pass now. This time she approached from the east, using the bridge itself to mask her approach until the final seconds. The enemy soldiers were still looking west, still expecting conventional attack vectors, when 30mm death erupted from the darkness behind them. The sandbagged positions disintegrated under the impact of depleted uranium rounds, traveling at 3,000 feet per second. What had been a formidable defensive position moments before became a moonscape of craters and debris. But even as she pulled up from the attack run, Viper's trained eye caught movement in her peripheral vision, a lone figure with what appeared to be a shoulder-fired SAM. "Missile launch," she called over the radio, seeing the distinctive smoke trail of a surface-to-air missile streaking toward her position. The A-10 was an older system, but deadly effective against low-flying aircraft. Her only defense was maneuverability and countermeasures. She jinked hard right, then left, releasing chaff and flares while using the canyon walls to break the missile's infrared lock. The SA-7 detonated harmlessly against the eastern canyon wall, sending a shower of rock fragments into the river below. Viper 1-1, you okay up there? Harrison's voice carried genuine concern despite his own desperate situation. Still flying, Reaper 7. That's the last of their organized resistance. Bridge is clear for your advance. But even as she spoke, Viper's radar warning receiver began screaming. More missiles were in the air, launched from positions she hadn't detected. The mobile SAM teams were finally reacting to her presence, and they had her trapped in the canyon with nowhere to run. The second missile appeared as a bright streak against the dark canyon wall, tracking directly toward her aircraft with deadly precision. This one was newer, more sophisticated, probably an SA-14 with advanced infrared guidance that would be harder to fool with traditional countermeasures. Viper dove toward the river's surface, using the water's thermal signature to confuse the missile's seeker head while simultaneously climbing toward the canyon rim. The maneuver was desperate and dangerous, requiring her to fly directly toward the mountain face before pulling up at the last possible second. The missile exploded behind her, close enough to rattle the aircraft and trigger multiple warning systems. Hydraulic pressure was dropping in the secondary system, and she had lost partial control authority in her right aileron. The A-10 was legendary for its ability to absorb battle damage, but even the Warthog had its limits. Viper 1-1, Overwatch. Satellite imagery shows remaining enemy forces withdrawing from bridge area. Mission success. RTB when ready. Return to base. The words every combat pilot longed to hear. But as Viper assessed her aircraft's condition and looked down at the bridge where SEAL Team 5 was beginning their advance, she realized her mission wasn't complete. Intelligence reports indicated additional enemy forces moving toward the bridge from the north, reinforcements that would arrive just as the wounded SEALs were most vulnerable. Overwatch, Viper 1-1. Request permission to remain on station. I still have ordnance and the SEALs might need cover during their crossing. Negative, Viper 1-1. Your aircraft is damaged. RTB immediately. Viper looked at her instruments, then at the infrared display showing SEAL positions moving slowly toward the bridge. 3 wounded men, limited ammunition, and enemy reinforcements potentially less than 10 minutes away. The math was simple and terrifying. Overwatch, Viper 1-1, I'm staying. The silence that followed her transmission carried the weight of military discipline clashing with combat necessity. Every person monitoring the radio frequency understood that she had just disobeyed a direct order. They also understood why. Lieutenant Commander Harrison's voice cut through the static. Viper 1-1, Reaper 7. We can make it across without additional support. Don't risk your aircraft for us. Negative, Reaper 7. I didn't come this far to watch good men die because I was worried about bent metal. I'm staying until you're across safely. As she circled high above the bridge, Viper could see the SEALs moving cautiously through the positions she had destroyed. Their thermal signatures showed the careful, methodical advance of professional warriors who had survived 12 hours of continuous combat through superior tactics and sheer determination. But they were also moving slowly, too slowly for men who might have fresh enemies arriving at any moment. Through her targeting pod, she watched as the SEAL medic worked over a wounded teammate while the others provided security. The scene played out in stark infrared contrast, professional competence under extreme pressure, the kind of moment that defined both units and individuals. Her radar warning receiver chimed softly, indicating aircraft approaching from the south. Friendly aircraft, according to the identification system, probably the Apache helicopters that had been grounded with mechanical problems, finally getting airborne. But they were still 15 minutes out, and 15 minutes might as well be 15 hours if enemy reinforcements arrived first. Viper 1-1, this is Crimson Base Actual, came Colonel Voss's voice over the command frequency. You are ordered to return to base immediately. That is a direct order from your commanding officer. Viper's hands tightened on the flight controls as she processed the implications of her next words. Disobeying orders in a combat zone was a court-martial offense at minimum, but abandoning wounded teammates was a violation of something far more fundamental than military regulations. Colonel, with respect, I have eyes on enemy movement north of the bridge. The SEALs need cover for their extraction. I'm staying on station. The long pause that followed contained multitudes, career implications, chain of command protocols, and the unspoken understanding that some decisions transcended conventional military hierarchy. When Colonel Voss spoke again, her voice carried the weight of 25 years of command experience. Very well, Lieutenant. You have tactical control until the SEALs are extracted, but if your aircraft becomes uncontrollable, you eject immediately. We will not lose a pilot to false heroics. Understood, ma'am. No false heroics. Below her, the SEALs had reached the bridge itself, their movement now clearly visible through her targeting system. She could see them setting up security positions while the wounded were prepared for transport. Their discipline was remarkable. Even exhausted and low on ammunition, they moved with the precision of a Swiss watch. Then her worst fears materialized. Vehicle headlights appeared on the northern approach road, moving fast toward the bridge. Too fast to be friendly forces, too organized to be civilians. Enemy reinforcements, arriving exactly when the SEALs were most vulnerable. Reaper 7, Viper 1-1. I have enemy vehicles approaching your position from the north. At least 3 trucks, probably carrying 15 to 20 fighters. ETA approximately 5 minutes. Harrison's response was immediate. Copy, Viper 1-1. Can you engage? Viper checked her weapons status. She still had 2 Maverick missiles and enough 30mm ammunition for 1 sustained gun run. Against soft-skinned vehicles, that should be more than sufficient. But engaging would require another low-level approach through a canyon that might contain additional SAM teams, using an aircraft that was already operating with battle damage. Affirmative, Reaper 7. I can engage, keep your heads down. She banked toward the northern approach, lining up for an attack run that would bring her directly over the enemy vehicles. Through her targeting pod, she could see armed figures in the truck beds, weapons glinting in the infrared display. They were moving with the confidence of fighters who believed they were about to complete a successful ambush. They were about to learn otherwise. Viper 1-1 engaging enemy reinforcements, she transmitted, settling into the familiar rhythm of combat flying. Fear transformed into focus, uncertainty became clarity, and everything outside her aircraft's mission parameters simply ceased to exist. The lead truck exploded in a ball of flame as her first Maverick missile found its target, the thermal bloom whiting out her infrared display momentarily. The second truck swerved wildly to avoid debris, presenting a perfect profile for her second missile. 2 explosions, 2 kills, but the third truck had stopped and was disgorging armed fighters who immediately began setting up defensive positions. Time for the GAU-8. Guns, 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 she called, bringing the cannon to bear on the scattered enemy positions. 30-millimeter rounds churned the roadway into a moonscape of craters and twisted metal, eliminating the threat with surgical violence that was both terrible and necessary. Viper 1-1, Reaper 7. Outstanding shooting. Enemy reinforcements neutralized. We're moving across the bridge now. Through her targeting pod, Viper watched the SEALs begin their crossing, moving with renewed urgency now that their escape route was clear. The wounded were being carried by their teammates, nobody left behind, the fundamental creed of American Special Operations Forces made manifest in the pre-dawn darkness. But her aircraft was protesting more loudly now. Multiple warning systems were active, hydraulic pressure continued to decline, and she was beginning to lose control authority in several flight surfaces. The A-10 was tough, but it wasn't invincible. She needed to get back to base before something critical failed. Reaper 7, Viper 1-1. My aircraft is showing battle damage. I need to RTB. What's your status? Viper 1-1, we're across the bridge and moving to Extraction Point Alpha. Apache birds are inbound for pickup. We're good to go. Harrison's voice carried exhaustion and relief in equal measure. Thanks for pulling our bacon out of the fire. Anytime, Reaper 7. See you back at base. As she turned toward home, Viper allowed herself a moment to process what had just happened. She had disobeyed direct orders from her commanding officer, flown a damaged aircraft through enemy fire multiple times, and engaged superior numbers with surgical precision that had saved the lives of 8 American Special Operations personnel. She had also probably ended her military career. The thought should have bothered her more than it did, but as she nursed her wounded A-10 through the Afghan mountains toward the landing lights of Forward Operating Base Crimson, Viper found herself oddly at peace. Some things were more important than career advancement or personal safety. Some moments defined who you were when everything else was stripped away. Crimson Tower, Viper 1-1 requesting immediate landing. Aircraft has battle damage, requesting priority handling. Viper 1-1, Crimson Tower. You are cleared for immediate approach runway 27. Emergency equipment is standing by. Welcome home. Home. The word carried new meaning as she lined up for landing, her damaged aircraft responding sluggishly to control inputs. The base lights grew larger through her windscreen, beacon lights of civilization, in a hostile landscape that had claimed too many good people already. The landing was rougher than usual, her damaged flight controls making precise touchdown impossible. But the A-10's robust landing gear absorbed the impact without complaint, and she was able to taxi to her parking spot under her own power. As she shut down the engines and began securing her aircraft, Viper reflected on the events of the past 2 hours with the detached professionalism that separated combat veterans from everyone else. Mission accomplished. SEALs extracted safely. Enemy forces neutralized. Aircraft damaged but recoverable. By any objective measure, it had been a complete success. So why did she have the feeling that the hardest part was still ahead of her? Senior Airman Rodriguez was waiting for her as she climbed out of the cockpit, his experienced eyes already cataloging the battle damage that decorated her aircraft like medals of honor. Bullet holes in the vertical stabilizers, shrapnel damage along the fuselage, and hydraulic fluid staining the concrete beneath the wings told the story of a pilot who had flown through hell and emerged on the other side. Jesus, Lieutenant, Rodriguez muttered, running his hands over a particularly large hole in the left wing. "What did they throw at you up there? This looks like you flew through a fireworks factory." "Something like that," Viper replied, removing her helmet and running fingers through sweat-dampened hair. "How long to get her back to mission-ready status?" 48 hours minimum, assuming we can get the parts." Rodriguez paused in his inspection to look directly at his pilot. "Ma'am, you know they're going to want to talk to you about tonight." Before she could respond, a convoy of vehicles approached her parking area. Colonel Voss emerged from the lead Humvee, her expression unreadable in the harsh glare of the flight line lights. Behind her came Captain Santos and several other officers whose presence indicated that this was more than a casual mission debrief. "Lieutenant Blackthorne," Colonel Voss said formally, "you will report to my office immediately for mission debriefing." "Yes, ma'am." Viper straightened to attention despite her exhaustion. "Senior Airman Rodriguez, secure the aircraft and begin battle damage assessment." "Will do, Lieutenant, and ma'am, outstanding flying tonight." The praise meant more than any medal could, coming from a crew chief who had seen hundreds of combat missions. Rodriguez wasn't given to false compliments or empty flattery. If he said the flying was outstanding, it was because he had witnessed something exceptional. The walk to Colonel Voss's office seemed longer than usual, every step carrying Viper.